For 27 years, this man was locked away from the world. The government called him dangerous. They said he was a criminal. They said he could destroy the country. But outside prison walls, millions of people were fighting for him. Songs were recorded about him. Protests filled the streets. Nations punished an entire country because of him. All because of a prisoner. But here is where the story becomes strange. For many years, no one saw him. No photos of him, no live interviews, no proof he was even alive. Then suddenly, the prison gates open and a man walked out. The world celebrated, but many people whisper, this is not the same man. Some said prison had destroyed him. Others said something even darker. They said the real prisoner died behind bars and the government replaced him, because how does someone disappear for nearly 3 decades and return looking completely different? Now, who is this mysterious prisoner? Why is it so important? And what really happened inside that prison? This is a story of Nelson Mandela, the man who stood up against racist system and refused to bow. The man who fought for the freedom of South Africa when freedom seemed impossible. The man a powerful government feared so much that they locked him away for 25 years. In this documentary, we are going to unveil the truth behind the rise of Nelson Mandela, why he was locked up in prison, and why South Africans thought he died in prison and the government replaced him. Brace yourself. My name is princeteepzy, and this is Fame and Fallout. To really understand the story of Nelson Mandela and how he fought for freedom in South Africa against the apartheid government, we need to go back to the very beginning. Long before the world knew the name Nelson Mandela, before he went to prison, before the protests, and before the presidency, there was just a small boy in a tiny village in South Africa in the year 1918. The village was called Mvezo, a quiet rural community surrounded by rivers, hills, and farmland. His parents did not name him Nelson. His real African name was Rolihlahla Mandela. In his native language, Rolihlahla meant pulling a branch of a tree, but in simple words, it meant troublemaker, and unknowingly, history was already predicting his future. Nelson Mandela was not born poor. He was born into a royal family of the Tembo tribe. His father, Gadla Henry Mandela, was a local chief of the Xhosa people and a respected chief and advisor to the king. And when Mandela was still very young, his father lost his position. Soon after, he lost his father and everything changed. The family became poor. The little boy who was born into royalty now lived a simple village life, sleeping in mud houses, walking barefoot, and eating simple food. But even in poverty, Mandela was raised with strong values, respect, discipline, and courage. Unlike many children in the village, Mandela loved school. He walked long distances just to attend classes. One day in school, a teacher gave him a new name, a Christian name, and that name was Nelson. This was common under the British rule. From that day, Rolihlahla became Nelson Mandela. After his father's death, Mandela was sent to live with the king of the Tembo people, and the king treated him like a son. He gave him good education and he trained him in leadership. Mandela listened to elders telling stories of African freedom, stories of how black people once ruled their land before white men took over. Those stories entered his heart, and slowly a fire started burning inside of him. Nelson Mandela later went to the university, and this was very rare for black South African people at that time. He studied law. He wanted to become a lawyer to help his people fight injustice, because even in school, racism was everywhere. White children were treated better. Black children were treated like nothing. And Mandela began to understand something painful. In his own country, his people were strangers. While in the university, Mandela joined student protests against unfair treatment. This was his first real fight against injustice. Because of this, he was expelled from school. The king became angry, and Mandela was almost forced into an arranged marriage. But Mandela refused. Instead, he ran away to Johannesburg with little money, no connections, but only dreams. And that journey changed his life forever. When Nelson Mandela arrived in Johannesburg, it felt like a different world. Tall buildings, busy streets, white people living in comfort, and black people living in suffering. For the first time in his life, Mandela saw racism clearly, not in stories anymore, not in books, but with his own eyes. In Johannesburg, black South Africans were treated like strangers in their own land. They needed special paper just to walk around the city. If a black man forgot his pass, he could be arrested instantly. White people live in clean areas, while black people were pushed into dirty, crowded slums. White children went to good schools, black children went to broken schools. White children had rights, black people had nothing. This system was called apartheid, a system built to make white people powerful and black people powerless. Nelson Mandela worked small jobs, sometimes as a guard, sometimes as a clerk, and everywhere he saw his people being insulted. White bosses shouting at black workers, police beating black men in the streets, families thrown out of their own houses, people arrested for nothing. He saw old men cry, he saw mothers beg, he saw children hungry, and each day his anger grew. But it wasn't just anger, it was pain. Mandela later met a young man named Walter Sisulu. Walter introduced him into politics and to a group fighting for black rights, the African National Congress, ANC. This group believed black people deserve freedom, equal rights, and respect, and Mandela joined them. At first, he was quiet, listening, learning, understanding how deep the problem was. But slowly, his voice became stronger. Nelson Mandela continued studying law while working, and after many struggles, he finally became a lawyer, one of the first black lawyers in South Africa. Together with another activist, Oliver Tambo, he opened a law firm for poor black people, people who were abused, people who were arrested unfairly, people who had no one to defend them. Mandela fought cases for free sometimes. He saw injustice every day, and each case made him more determined. The government kept making harsher laws. Peaceful protesters were beaten, some were killed, and Mandela realized something painful. The system was not listening. The system was not changing. The system only understood force, and slowly, the peaceful young lawyer started turning into a revolutionary. But Mandela still believed that peace could work for now. Johannesburg opened Mandela's eyes. It showed him the cruelty of racism. It showed him the suffering of his people. It turned his pain into purpose. But soon, peaceful protests would fail, and Nelson Mandela would be forced to make a dangerous decision, a decision that would change his life forever. By the early 1940s, Nelson Mandela was no longer a lawyer. He was becoming a voice black South Africans were beginning to listen to, a voice the white government was beginning to fear. Inside the African National Congress, Mandela and other young activists felt something. The older leaders were too slow, too careful, too gentle, while black people were suffering every day. So Mandela, Walter Sisulu, and Oliver Tambo created a new group. It was called ANC Youth League. This group wanted action, not just meetings, not just speeches, but real pressure on the government. They organized marches, boycotts, strikes, protests, and thousands of black people joined in. For the first time, the government felt the heat. The white government did not like this movement, so the police attacked protesters. People were beaten, some were even killed. Their leaders were arrested, and Mandela himself was arrested many times, but every arrest made him stronger. Every beating made him more popular. Black South Africans began to see him as a hero, a brave man that was brave enough to stand up for his people. In 1952, the ANC launched a massive protest called the Defiance Campaign. People deliberately broke racist laws. They entered white-only areas. They refused to carry passes. They filled the prison, and the goal was simple: make the system impossible to control. Mandela became the face of this campaign. The newspaper talked about him. The police watched him closely, and the government marked him as a dangerous person.
Notwithstanding our clear declaration that this campaign is being run on peaceful and non-violent lines, close the chapter as far as our methods of political struggle are concerned. There are many people who feel that it is useless and futile for us to continue talking peace and non-violence against a government whose reply is only savage attacks on an unarmed and defenseless people.
To the black people, Mandela was a freedom fighter, but to the white government, he was a criminal. They banned him from attending meetings. They banned him from speaking in public. They banned him from traveling. Sometimes he was forced to stay inside his house for months. But Mandela refused to stop. He continued secretly, moving from place to place.
This is your final warning!
In 1960, peaceful protesters gathered in a town called Sharpeville. They were unarmed. They were simply protesting against the racist law. And then the police opened fire. They killed 69 black people, and many of them were shot while running away. Blood covered the streets. South Africa was shocked, the world was shocked, and Mandela was heartbroken and angry. After Sharpeville, the government banned ANC completely. Peaceful protest was now illegal, and Mandela realized something painful. The government would never change peacefully. They were ready to kill innocent people, and so Mandela made the hardest decision of his life. He decided that the struggle must turn violent, not to kill people, but to destroy government properties, to fight back, to make the system feel the pain. Nelson Mandela tried peace, and it failed. Now he was about to enter a dangerous war against the apartheid government, a war that will make him the most wanted black South African. After the Sharpeville massacre, Nelson Mandela knew something had changed forever. Peaceful protest was dead. The government had shown that they were ready to kill, and Mandela believed freedom would never come without sacrifice. Since ANC was now banned, Mandela disappeared from public life. He began to live in secrets, moving from house to house, sleeping in different places every night. Sometimes he disguised as a worker. Sometimes he dressed as a driver. Sometimes he pretended to be a gardener. He had to do all this because the police were searching everywhere for him, but they couldn't find him. Mandela and the other leaders created a secret group called Ukonto Wesiwe, which means spare the nation. The group was not created to kill innocent people. Their mission was to destroy government buildings, damage power stations, and attack the symbols of apartheid. The purpose of this movement is to send a message to the government that the people would no longer accept oppression quietly. Bombs were placed at night when nobody was around. The government panicked, and South Africa was no longer calm. Mandela secretly left South Africa and traveled across Africa. He met leaders in countries like Ghana, Ethiopia, and Algeria. He asked them for training, money, support, weapons, and many African leaders supported him. They saw Mandela as a freedom hero, but this also made South African government even angrier. In 1962, Mandela returned to South Africa secretly. By this time, the police were waiting for him. One day, on a lonely road, the police stopped his car. They dragged him out of the car and arrested him. After months of hiding, Nelson Mandela was finally caught. the most wanted man in South Africa was now a prisoner. Mandela and other leaders were taken to court. This became known as the Rivonia trial. The government charged them with sabotage, treason, and trying to overthrow the government. The punishment could be death. The courtroom was tense. The world was watching, and Mandela stood up and he gave one of the greatest speeches in history.
I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the idea of a democratic and free society.
He said, I have fought against white domination and I have fought against black domination. I cherish the ideal of democratic and free society. It is an ideal for which I am prepared to die. The courtroom was silent. Even his enemies were shocked by his courage. So, instead of killing him, the judge sentenced Mandela to life imprisonment. Mandela was taken away in chains. Little did he know he would spend the next 27 years of his life behind bars, and the suffering was just the beginning. Nelson Mandela has sacrificed everything: his youth, his career, his family, his freedom. Now he was entering a prison that breaks many men. But the question is, would prison break him? When Nelson Mandela arrived at Robben Island prison, he knew his life would never be the same again. The prison was not built to correct people, it was built to break them. It was located on a cold island surrounded by sea. Even escape was impossible. Hope was thin, and suffering was daily. The guards did not see Mandela as a human being. They saw him as a dangerous black man, a rebel, and an enemy. On his first day, they stripped him naked. They searched every part of his body. They shouted insults at him. They beat some prisoners in front of others just to create fear. Mandela was given a prison number, not a name. From that day, he was no longer Nelson Mandela. He was just a prisoner. Mandela's cell was small, almost like a bathroom. No bed, just a thin mat on the floor. No blanket, cold night, hard floor, and a small bucket for toilet. And that was it. He slept there for years. Every day, Mandela and other prisoners were forced to work. They were taken to limestone quarry under hot sun. They used heavy tools to break stones. The white dust from the limestone filled the air. It entered their ears, their lungs, and their mouths. Mandela's eyes were slowly damaged. His health weakened, but the guards did not care. If anyone slowed down, they were beaten. Black prisoners were treated worse than white prisoners. They were given less food, no trousers, only shorts, even in the cold weather. They were not allowed to talk, not allowed to sing, not allowed to complain, not even visitation from family members were allowed. Letters were censored. Sometimes Mandela would wait months to hear from his children, and after many times, the guard would destroy the letters. While Mandela was in prison, his mother died. The government refused to let him attend her burial. And later, his eldest son died in a car accident. And again, Mandela was not allowed to go. He cried alone in his cell. He became a father who could not bury his son, and a son who could not bury his mother. This pain broke many prisoners, but Mandela held on. Even in suffering, Mandela refused to hate. He remained calm. He treated fellow prisoners with respect. He encouraged them. He shared food with them. He listened to their story. Slowly, Mandela became a leader inside the prison. The younger prisoner respected him. Even some guards secretly respected him as well. Because no matter how much they punished him, they could not destroy his spirit. Robben Island was meant to destroy Nelson Mandela, but instead, it was shaping him into something greater, a man of patience, a man of wisdom, a man of unbreakable strength. But the years were long, and the suffering was far from being over. Years passed on Robben Island. 1 year turned into 5. 5 years turned into 10. 10 years turned into 20. And slowly, Nelson Mandela was changing. Not just inside, but also on the outside. The hard labor damaged his back. The cold night weakened his bone. The limestone dust damaged his eyes permanently. His hair turned gray. His face developed deep lines. His once strong body became thin and tired. Prison was stealing his youth. By the time many years had passed, Mandela no longer looked like the young man who entered the prison. He looked like an old man. This was one of the reasons people later believed in Rumour that he was replaced, because prison had transformed him completely. But while his body suffered, his mind grew stronger. Mandela spent years reading books, studying law, learning history, and learning leadership. Him and other prisoners secretly taught each other. They call it the University of Robben Island. In that university, everyone learned something: politics, languages, economics, and many more. Mandela believed education was a real weapon against oppression. Many prisoners were angry. Some wanted revenge. Some shouted at the guards. Some fought back, but Mandela stayed calm. He spoke politely even to the cruel guards. Not because he was weak, but because he was strategic. He believed anger would destroy the struggle. He believed patience would win it. Slowly, some guards began to treat him better. They listened to him. Some even secretly helped him. Mandela learned the language of the white guard. That language is called Afrikaans. They were shocked. They saw he was trying to understand them. He spoke to them about their families, their fears, their lives, and slowly the hatred reduced. Some guards began to see him not as an enemy, but as a human being. Mandela was building peace, even inside the prison. For many years, the world had almost nothing from Mandela. The government tried to erase him. No interviews, few pictures, no public appearances. Some people thought he was dead. Some thought he was sick. Some thought he had been killed secretly. This silence helped the rumor grow later, because when a man disappeared for 27 years, people begin to imagine anything. For many years, the South African government tried to hide Nelson Mandela. They thought if people stopped hearing his name, the struggle would die. But the opposite happened. The longer Mandela stayed in prison, the bigger his name became. The news slowly spread outside South Africa. People learned about apartheid. They learned about black people being treated like animals. They learned about Nelson Mandela, the man they locked away for fighting injustice. Countries began to speak up. Human rights groups protested. Students marched in the streets across Europe, America, Africa, Australia, and they all shouted one message: free Nelson Mandela. Artists sang about Mandela. Songs were written in his name. Concerts were organized. Millions of people attended. One massive concert in London was watched by the whole world. Mandela's name was everywhere. Even people who knew nothing about South Africa now knew the name Nelson Mandela. Because of apartheid, many countries punished South Africa. They stopped trading. They banned South African sport teams. They cut relationship with South Africa. South Africa's economy began to suffer. The white government felt the pressure, big pressure. The government secretly offered Mandela freedom, but with one condition. They said, you will leave the prison, but you must stop fighting. And Nelson Mandela refused. He said, what freedom is that when my people are not free? So he chose prison over fake freedom, and this made him a hero worldwide. Inside the country, young people protested. Workers went on strike. Township burned with anger. The police used violence, but the protests kept growing. Mandela became a symbol. Even though he was locked up, a spirit was leading the struggle. By the 1980s, Mandela was no longer just a man. He was a movement, a legend, a symbol of freedom. The government realized something scary. They could lock his body, but they could not lock his influence. And slowly, they began to consider something impossible before releasing him. As the pressure on the government increased, something strange began to happen. Nelson Mandela was quietly removed from Robben Island without announcement, no news, no pictures, no explanation. One day, he was just gone. Mandela was transferred to different prisons, first to Portsmouth prison, later to a private house inside another prison called Victor Vesta. The government said little about him. The public knew almost nothing. For many years, Mandela was hidden from the world again. No interviews, no public photos, no visitors except few officials. This silence made people nervous. Mandela's health was getting worse. Years of hard labor had damaged his lungs. He developed breathing problems. At one point, he was taken to a hospital secretly. The government feared that if Mandela died in prison, the country would explode. So everything was kept quiet. For many Africans, it felt like Mandela had vanished. Some people said they've killed him. Others said they were hiding his body. Some said he is too sick to be shown. And slowly, a rumor was born that Nelson Mandela had died. As the years passed by, people started whispering something darker. They said, if Mandela died, the government would never announce it. They will bring another man, train him, make him pretend so the nation would calm down. It sounded crazy, right? But to many people, it felt possible because no one had seen Mandela in years. That silence created a mystery. Some elders swore Mandela was gone. Some claimed the government official had confirmed it secretly. Others said the prison was hiding a big secret. The rumor spread quietly but strongly until one day the impossible happened. On February 11, 1990, something unbelievable happened. After 27 years long in prison, Nelson Mandela was finally released. Television cameras around the world were ready. Millions of people held their breath. South Africa stopped. The world stopped. Slowly, a big prison gate opened and a man walked out. He held the hand of his wife. He raised his fist in the air. The crowd screamed. People cried and they said, freedom. The world celebrated Mandela's freedom, but the rumor followed him everywhere. Some believe in the miracle of survival. Others believe in a secret replacement. But Mandela himself had no time for these rumors because a bigger mission was waiting for him. And that mission was ending apartheid forever. After Nelson Mandela walked out of prison, South Africa was still divided. Apartheid laws were still active. Black people were still suffering. White leaders were still in control. But something had changed. The world was watching, and Mandela is now free. Mandela sat down with the same government that had locked him up, the same leader who had oppressed his people, the same system that tried to break him. And among them was the president of South Africa at that time, F.W. de Klerk. They began serious talks about ending apartheid, talks about allowing black people to vote, talks about building a new South Africa. But not everyone wanted peace. Some black groups wanted revenge. Some white groups wanted to keep power. Violence broke out in many places. People were killed. Cities burned. South Africa was close to a civil war. Mandela worked day and night, calming people, asking them to be patient, asking them not to destroy the country. Slowly, the racist law was removed. Black people were allowed political rights. Banned political parties were restored. Prisoners were released. South Africa was changing. Something many thought was impossible was finally happening. Because of their effort to end racism peacefully, Mandela and de Klerk were awarded the Nobel Prize in 1993. The world praised Mandela from a prisoner to a peacemaker. In 1994, South Africa held its first democratic election. For the first time in history, black people could vote. Millions lined up for hours. Old people cried for joy. Young people celebrated. Freedom had finally come. And when the results were announced, Nelson Mandela had won. Nelson Mandela became the first black South African president. A man who once slept on the prison floor now lived in the presidential house. A man who they once called a criminal now led the nation. It was one of the greatest comebacks in human history. After 27 years in prison, Nelson Mandela had risen to the highest office in the land. But the hardest job was just beginning. Nelson Mandela said something powerful. He said, "If we fight each other now, we will destroy the country we just freed." Instead of arresting white officials, he invited them to work with him. Instead of kicking out white people, he told them they belonged to South Africa. He wanted one nation, black and white people together. This decision saved South Africa from civil war. Mandela created something called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. People who committed crime during apartheid were invited to confess. Victims were allowed to speak up. The goal was not to punish anyone. The goal was healing. Families cried. Truth was revealed. Pain was shared. South Africa faced its dark past peacefully. One of Mandela's smartest moves was through sport. Rugby was loved by white South Africans. Black people hated it because it symbolized oppression. But Nelson Mandela supported the national rugby team. He wore their jersey publicly. For the first time, they felt like one nation. Mandela became one of the most respected leaders on earth. World presidents bowed to him. Kings praised him. People everywhere saw him as a symbol of peace. From prison, he became a global hero.
I have spent a long time in prison and wasted away the most productive years of my life. Those conditions would make any man very bitter and his heart to be full of hate.
Mandela proved something rare, that forgiveness can be more powerful than anger, that peace can win where violence fails. But age was catching up with him, and very soon he would step away from power. After leading South Africa through its most difficult time, Nelson Mandela made a shocking decision. He chose not to rule forever. Unlike many African leaders who stayed in power for life, Mandela stepped down just after one term. He believed leadership was about service, not control. In 1999, Mandela officially left office. The world praised him again. A man who had the chance to hold power but chose humility instead. He handed over leadership peacefully. This was rare in Africa, and it made him more respected.
We dare not fail. History and the world will judge us very harshly if we do not do what is just and correct. We will not have a second chance. I wish this conference success.
Mandela returned to a simple life, spending time with family, resting, reading, sometimes traveling to speak about peace and freedom. But his health was not strong anymore. Years of prison had damaged his body. His lungs were weak and he fell sick very often. Even in old age, Mandela continued to help people. He supported education programs. He fought against HIV and AIDS. He helped poor communities. He spoke for human rights across the world. Though he was weak, his voice was still powerful. As years passed, Nelson Mandela became weaker. His breathing became difficult. He spent more of his time in hospitals. Doctors tried their best, but age and years of suffering had taken a toll on him. Then, on December 5th, 2013, something terrible happened. Nelson Mandela passed away peacefully. He was 95 years old. The news spread across the world in minutes. South Africa stopped. The world stopped. People cried on the street. Families gathered around their televisions.
Fellow South Africans, our beloved Nelson Mandela, the founding president of our democratic nation, has departed.
His name was everywhere. World leaders traveled to South Africa. President, kings, prime minister, famous people, ordinary citizens, everyone came to honor one man. Stadiums were filled up with mourners. People sang, people cried, people celebrated his life. It was one of the biggest funerals in history.
Within hours of his death, a moment of silence at the United Nations Security Council. It seems across the globe, there is universal mourning for Nelson Mandela. At the White House, President Barack Obama immediately left a Hanukkah reception to send this message of gratitude.
For many years, some people believe Nelson Mandela was replaced. Some still believe the real Nelson Mandela died in prison. Some still question the man who walked out of prison in 1990. But the truth is simpler and more powerful than any conspiracy. Nelson Mandela entered prison in his early 40s. He came out at the age of 71. That alone can change any human being. His prison life was not normal. It was brutal. Hard labor every day. Cold nights on hard floor. Poor food. Beatings. Emotional torture. Losing his mother. Losing his son. Many people expected an angry man, but Nelson Mandela came out peaceful because prison taught him wisdom. He understood something deep. If he came out with revenge, South Africa would drown in blood. Millions would die, so he chose peace, not weakness, but strength. These are some proof he was always the same man. There are prison records, court documents, doctors, wardens, and all of them confirm Mandela was still alive throughout his imprisonment. The government had many faults, but hiding Mandela's death would have been impossible because the world was watching. The real miracle was not replacement. The real miracle was survival. That a man could survive 27 years of brutal prison and still come out with forgiveness, still come out with love, still come out with vision. That is a true mystery and the true power.
He went to school barefoot, and yet he rose to the highest office of the land. He became the president of South Africa and the greatest statesman in the world.
If you love stories like this, you might also like to watch the truth behind the death of Fela and Nicolas Kuti. Click here right now to watch it, or click here to watch more film and fallout stories. Thank you for watching.